The credit card statement arrived on the same Tuesday Erica collapsed at the PTA meeting. Reuben Altman found both waiting for him when he returned from the hospital. One crisp white envelope on the kitchen counter, the other a memory burned into his retinas of his wife's body hitting the gymnasium floor like a marionette with severed strings. He opened the statement first. $847 at Victoria's Secret. $312 at a hotel restaurant he'd never heard of. $89 at a lingerie boutique downtown. All purchased last Thursday, when Erica claimed she was working late at the nutrition lab. The irony wasn't lost on him. 23 years as a building inspector had taught him to spot structural problems before walls started cracking. But he'd missed the rot in his own foundation. Dad? Owen's voice cut through his thoughts. His 17-year-old son stood in the doorway, still wearing his school clothes, backpack slung over one shoulder. How's Mom? They're running tests. Reuben folded the statement and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Could be exhaustion. Could be something else. Owen nodded, accepting the non-answer the way teenagers do when they sense adults are protecting them from something bigger. Raina's freaking out. She keeps asking if Mom's gonna die. Your mother isn't dying. The words came out more certain than Reuben felt. He'd learned in his profession that foundations could look solid right up until they weren't. That night, while Erica slept in the hospital bed with an IV drip feeding into her arm, Reuben sat in the uncomfortable visitor's chair and studied her face. Even unconscious, she looked different than she had 6 months ago. Her cheekbones were more prominent, her skin tighter. He'd attributed it to the stress of her new position at Morrison Health Labs, but now he wondered what other changes he'd failed to notice. Dr. Sarah Kim entered without knocking. Mr. Altman? I have the test results, Reuben straightened. And? Your wife has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's aggressive but treatable. We caught it early, which is fortunate. The words hit him like a sledgehammer, but Reuben's expression didn't change. 23 years of delivering bad news to homeowners about foundation problems, electrical hazards, and structural damage had taught him to keep his face neutral while his world shifted. What does treatment involve? Chemotherapy, radiation, possibly a bone marrow transplant? The good news is that with her age and general health, the 5-year survival rate is about 70%. 70%? Reuben had rejected houses with better odds than that. The treatment will be expensive, Dr. Kim continued. Even with insurance, you're looking at significant out-of-pocket costs. Reuben nodded. How much? Potentially $200,000, maybe more. That night, Reuben drove home in silence, his mind calculating. Their savings account held $37,000. His retirement fund had another $80,000. The house had equity, but not enough. There was only one asset that could cover the shortfall, the lake cabin in Michigan he'd inherited from his father. The cabin represented more than money. It was where he'd learned to fish, where he'd proposed to Erica, where Owen had taken his first steps, where Raina had caught her first base. It was the only thing his father had left him besides a stubborn streak and an eye for detail. But Erica was his wife, the mother of his children, the woman he'd promised to protect in sickness and in health. He called the realtor the next morning. 3 weeks later, while Erica underwent her first round of chemotherapy, Reuben signed the closing papers on the cabin. The buyer paid cash, $185,000 for 40 acres of prime lakefront property and a hand-built log home that had sheltered 3 generations of Altman men. You sure about this, Reuben? Asked Janet Pierce, the realtor who'd helped his family buy the cabin 25 years earlier. This place means everything to you. My wife means more. Janet nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't convinced. What does Erica think about selling it? She doesn't know yet. I want to surprise her when the bills start coming in. That afternoon, Reuben deposited the check and opened a dedicated medical account. By evening, he'd paid the first round of treatment costs and still had enough left over to cover whatever came next. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt something else. A cold certainty that he'd made the first of many sacrifices that would never be acknowledged or appreciated. The pattern started small. Erica, weakened by chemotherapy, began sleeping in the guest room to avoid disturbing him with her restless nights. She claimed the change was temporary, but weeks stretched into months, and temporary became permanent. Phone calls came at odd hours. Work emergency, she'd whisper, slipping out to the back porch to take them. When Reuben asked about them later, she'd wave him off. Just lab drama, nothing important. Her appetite changed too. Foods she'd loved for 20 years suddenly made her nauseous, but she developed cravings for things she'd never shown interest in before. Expensive takeout from restaurants downtown, specific brands of coffee, imported chocolate that cost $12 a bar. "It's the treatment," Dr. Kim explained when Ruben mentioned it during one of Erica's appointments. "Chemotherapy can alter taste and smell dramatically, perfectly normal." Normal. Ruben filed the word away alongside the other explanations that felt almost right, but not quite. The real change came after Erica's third month of treatment, when her blood work showed significant improvement. The aggressive leukemia was responding better than expected to the therapy. Dr. Kim was cautiously optimistic. "This is wonderful news," she told them both during the appointment. "We're looking at a very positive prognosis." Erica smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "How positive? With this response rate?" "I'd say your chances of full remission are over 90%. That night, instead of celebrating, Erica picked at her dinner and excused herself early to take a shower. Ruben found her phone on the kitchen counter, screen lit with an incoming text. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place, same time?" The message was from a contact listed simply as CT. Ruben set the phone back exactly where he'd found it. His hands were steady, his breathing even. But something fundamental had shifted in his chest. Not heartbreak, exactly, but something colder and more dangerous. The next day, Ruben called in sick to work for the first time in 18 months. Instead of inspecting a questionable foundation on Maple Street, he followed his wife. Erica left the house at 9:47 a.m., claiming she had a lab appointment. But instead of driving toward Morrison Health Labs, she took the highway toward downtown and parked outside a converted warehouse that had been turned into expensive loft apartments. Ruben watched from his truck as a man emerged from the building to meet her. Tall, well-dressed, probably late 30s. They embraced like lovers, not colleagues. Ruben took 17 photos with his phone. None of them could be explained away as professional or innocent. That evening, Erica returned home with a story about complications at the lab, a colleague who'd made a mistake with a batch of supplements, paperwork that had taken hours to sort out. "How was your day?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside him. "Fine. Routine inspection on Maple Street. Foundation's solid, but the electrical needs work." She nodded absently, already reaching for her phone to check messages. Ruben watched her fingers move across the screen and realized he didn't recognize the woman sitting next to him. This person looked like his wife, spoke like his wife, but the Erica he'd married wouldn't have been able to lie to him with such casual ease. The Erica he'd married wouldn't have been cheating with another man while he sold his inheritance to pay for her medical bills. Over the next 2 weeks, Ruben established a pattern. Erica's lab appointments happened every Tuesday and Thursday between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. She always parked in the same spot, always met the same man, always returned home with elaborate explanations about work emergencies and difficult colleagues. Ruben's building inspection business gave him perfect cover for surveillance. His truck was unremarkable, his presence in different neighborhoods expected. He documented everything: times, locations, photographs, even the license plate number of the man's silver BMW. Calvin Trevors, age 38, divorced 2 years ago. Worked as a quality control supervisor at Morrison Health Labs, the same lab where Erica had gotten her promotion 6 months earlier. The timeline was too neat to be coincidental. Erica's behavior changes, her new job, her affair, they were all connected. The cancer had simply provided convenient cover for whatever had been happening long before her diagnosis. "Dad?" Owen found him in the garage on a Saturday morning studying printed photos spread across his workbench. "What are you working on?" Ruben gathered the photos quickly. Just some inspection documentation. Nothing important. But Owen had seen enough. His 17-year-old eyes held an intelligence that reminded Ruben uncomfortably of himself at that age. Too smart, too observant, too quick to spot the cracks in adult facades. "Is Mom having an affair?" The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Ruben could have deflected, could have lied, could have protected his son from the truth for a little while longer. Instead, he asked, "What makes you think that?" "She's different. The way she acts, the way she talks. And yesterday I saw a text on her phone when she was in the bathroom. Some guy named Cal asking if she missed him." Ruben set down the photos. "Oh, what do you want to do with that information?" "I want to know if you're going to leave her." I'm not leaving anyone, but I'm not going to pretend I don't know what's happening either. Owen nodded slowly. What can I do to help? The question surprised Ruben. He'd expected anger, tears, dramatic teenage emotion. Instead, his son was offering practical assistance. You don't need to do anything. This is between your mother and me. She's lying to all of us, and you sold Grandpa's cabin to pay for her treatment while she's been cheating on you. Owen's voice was steady, matter of fact. That's not just between you and her. Ruben studied his son's face. Owen had inherited his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn jaw. But the expression he wore now, calculating, determined, utterly without sentiment, that was pure Altman. If you want to help, Ruben said carefully, I could use someone good with technology. Owen smiled for the first time in weeks. What kind of technology? That afternoon, while Erica napped and Raina played video games in her room, Owen showed his father what 17 years in the digital age had taught him about surveillance. Her phone backs up to the cloud automatically, Owen explained, his fingers flying across his laptop keyboard. If I can get into her account, I can see everything. Texts, emails, photos, even her location history. Is that legal? It's her family plan. Technically, you're the account holder, so you have access rights. Owen paused, looking up from the screen. But it's definitely not ethical. Ethical went out the window when she started cheating with her coworker while I paid her medical bills. Owen blinked at his father's language, then nodded. Okay. Give me 10 minutes. 8 minutes later, Owen had complete access to his mother's digital life. Text messages, emails, photos, location data, everything she'd thought was private was now displayed on his laptop screen. The affair had started 4 months before her cancer diagnosis. The early messages were cautious, professional, discussions about lab procedures, quality control protocols, work schedules. But even then, there were undertones that suggested something more than collegial interest. Working late again tonight. Wish I had better company than these test results. I'd be happy to keep you company. Lab work is always better with someone to talk to. C. That's sweet of you to offer. Maybe someday I'll take you up on it. E. I hope you do. Soon. C. The progression was documented in painful detail. Lunch meetings that became drinks after work. Drinks that became dinner. Dinner that became hotel rooms charged to a credit card Ruben had never seen. Jesus, Owen whispered, scrolling through weeks of increasingly explicit messages. She's been planning this for months, but it was the photos that hit hardest. Not the explicit pictures, though there were plenty of those, but the casual ones. Erica laughing at restaurant tables Ruben had never seen. Erica wearing clothes he'd never bought her. Erica looking happier and more relaxed than she had at home in years. The woman in these photos wasn't sick. She wasn't weak or scared or fighting for her life. She was a woman having an affair, using her illness as cover for infidelity. There's something else, Owen said quietly. He clicked to a different folder, one filled with financial documents. She's been moving money. The statements showed a pattern of transfers from their joint savings account to a new checking account Ruben didn't know about. Small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there. But as the affair progressed, the transfers had gotten larger and more frequent. In total, Erica had moved nearly $15,000 into her secret account over the past 3 months. She's planning to leave, Ruben said. Or she's planning for you to leave her. Owen pointed to another document on the screen. She's been researching divorce lawyers, 3 different consultations scheduled for next month. Ruben leaned back in his chair, processing the information. His wife wasn't just having an affair. She was systematically preparing for the end of their marriage while he sold his inheritance to pay for her medical treatment. The betrayal was so complete, so carefully orchestrated, that he almost admired the precision of it. Almost. Dad? Owen's voice brought him back to the present. What are we going to do? Ruben looked at his son. Really looked at him. Owen had his mother's intelligence, but his father's methodical nature. He could be emotional when he chose to be, but right now, he was all business. We're going to plan, Ruben said, very carefully. The first step was documentation. Over the next week, Ruben compiled a comprehensive record of Erica's infidelity, photos, text messages, financial records, location data, everything admissible in court, organized with the same attention to detail he brought to building inspections. The second step was legal consultation. Ruben scheduled a meeting with Patricia Williams, the attorney who'd handled his parents' estate planning. "This is comprehensive," Patricia said, reviewing the evidence. "Almost too comprehensive." "How did you obtain all this information?" "I'm the account holder on our family cell phone plan. My son helped me access data that was already legally mine." Patricia nodded, but her expression remained cautious. "The evidence clearly demonstrates adultery, which gives you grounds for at-fault divorce in this state. But I have to ask, what's your goal here? Do you want to reconcile or do you want to end the marriage?" "I want her to understand what betrayal costs." "Mr. Altman, I need you to be more specific. Do you want custody of your children? Do you want to protect your assets? Do you want spousal support? What does justice look like to you?" Ruben considered the question. What did justice look like? It didn't look like screaming matches or broken dishes or dramatic confrontations. It didn't look like forgiveness or counseling or working things out. Justice looked like Erica experiencing the same shock of discovery he'd felt. Justice looked like consequences that matched the scale of the betrayal. "I want her to lose everything she values," Ruben said finally. "Her job, her reputation, her financial security, her lover. I want her to understand what it feels like to sacrifice everything for someone who throws it away." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "That's going to require more than just divorce proceedings. That's going to require strategy." "Then let's strategize." The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. Ruben would not confront Erica directly. Instead, he would systematically dismantle the life she was building with Calvin Trevors, while simultaneously protecting his own interests. Step 1. Asset protection. Ruben quietly moved money from their joint accounts into a trust fund for Owen and Raina's college education, perfectly legal, perfectly reasonable, and completely beyond Erica's reach. Step 2. Career destruction. Owen's research had revealed that Calvin had been falsifying quality control reports at Morrison Health Labs, approving supplements that didn't meet FDA standards. A few anonymous tips to the right regulatory agencies would trigger investigations that would cost both Calvin and Erica their jobs. Step 3. Public humiliation. The affair was documented in explicit detail across dozens of text messages and emails. A carefully orchestrated leak to the right people would ensure that everyone in their social circle knew exactly what Erica had been doing while her husband sold his inheritance to pay her medical bills. Step 4. Legal devastation. With documented proof of adultery and financial misconduct, Ruben could pursue an at-fault divorce that would leave Erica with minimal assets and no spousal support. It was comprehensive. It was methodical. It was utterly ruthless. It was perfect. The plan began implementation on a Tuesday morning in early October. Erica left for another lab appointment at 9:45 a.m., and Ruben made his first phone call at 10 a.m. sharp. "FDA Regulatory Compliance Office. I'd like to report suspected violations of supplement quality control standards at Morrison Health Labs." The conversation lasted 12 minutes. Ruben provided specific batch numbers, dates, and employee names. He mentioned concerns about falsified documentation and inadequate testing procedures. He requested anonymity, but offered to provide additional information if needed. The second call went to the state health department. Similar information, similar concerns, similar request for anonymity. The third call went to Morrison Health Labs corporate headquarters, an anonymous tip about potential liability exposure and regulatory violations. By noon, Ruben had triggered 3 separate investigations into the company where his wife and her lover worked. That evening, Erica came home agitated. "Bad day at work?" Ruben asked, not looking up from his newspaper. "Some bureaucratic nonsense. The FDA is asking questions about our quality control procedures. Probably just routine, but it's got everyone on edge." "I'm sure it's nothing," but it wasn't nothing. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigations intensified. FDA inspectors arrived unannounced. State regulators demanded documentation going back 18 months. Corporate lawyers started asking pointed questions about specific employees and their procedures. Calvin Trevors, as the quality control supervisor, found himself at the center of all 3 investigations. The evidence Owen had discovered, falsified reports, approved supplements that didn't meet standards, documentation that had been altered after the fact, made Calvin's guilt undeniable. But the investigators didn't stop with Calvin. They expanded their inquiry to include anyone who might have been complicit in the violations. Erica's name appeared on 17 different quality control documents that Calvin had falsified. As a nutrition lab consultant, she should have caught the discrepancies. Her failure to report them suggested either gross incompetence or active participation in the fraud. On October 28th, both Calvin and Erica were suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. They think I was involved, Erica told Ruben that night, her voice shaking. They think I helped Calvin falsify the reports. Did you? Of course not. I had no idea what he was doing. Ruben studied his wife's face. Even after months of documented lies, she could still look him in the eye and claim innocence with perfect sincerity. I'm sure the investigation will clear everything up, he said. But the investigation didn't clear anything up. If anything, it made matters worse. The more regulators dug into Morrison Health Lab's procedures, the more evidence they found of systematic fraud. And the more they investigated Calvin Travers, the more they discovered about his relationship with Erica Altman. The affair wasn't just personal, it was professional. Calvin had been feeding Erica inside information about upcoming inspections, regulatory changes, and corporate decisions. In return, Erica had helped him navigate the nutrition consulting side of the business, providing expertise that allowed him to falsify reports more convincingly. They weren't just lovers, they were co-conspirators. On November 15th, both Calvin and Erica were terminated for cause. 23 years of marriage, Erica said that night, standing in their kitchen with her termination letter in her hand. 23 years, and this is what I get? Fired because some asshole I trusted made me look guilty by association? Ruben set down his coffee cup. Is that what happened? Guilt by association? What else would it be? I don't know. Maybe guilt by participation? Erica's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means that maybe you weren't as innocent as you're pretending to be. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Ruben could see Erica calculating, trying to determine how much he knew and how much he was guessing. Are you accusing me of something, Ruben? I'm observing that you've been lying to me for months. The job, the treatment, the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, all lies. So forgive me if I don't automatically believe your version of events. Erica's face flushed. I have cancer. I've been fighting for my life while trying to build a career that could support this family if something happens to me. And instead of supporting me, you're questioning my integrity? Your integrity stopped being questionable the moment you started cheating with Calvin Travers. The words landed like a physical blow. Erica stumbled backward against the kitchen counter, her mouth falling open. How did you? Does it matter how I know? What matters is that I do know. Everything. The hotel rooms, the credit card bills, the secret checking account, the $15,000 you've been skimming from our savings. All of it. Erica's composure cracked completely. Ruben, I can explain. No! His voice was quiet, conversational. You can't explain. There's no explanation that makes this acceptable. There's no story that turns you into the victim here. I thought I was going to die. The words came out as a scream. I thought I had maybe a year left, and I wanted to feel alive, wanted to feel desired, wanted to feel like more than just a dying woman whose husband looked at her with pity. So you decided to cheat with your coworker while I sold my father's cabin to pay for your treatment? I didn't ask you to sell the cabin. You didn't ask me not to either. You just let me do it while you were planning your exit strategy. Erica began to cry. Not the gentle tears of sadness, but the harsh, ugly sobbing of someone whose carefully constructed lies had collapsed all at once. What do you want from me? She asked between sobs. What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. I want you to pack a bag and get out of my house. Your house? This is our house, our marriage. Our family. Our marriage ended the day you decided to start sleeping with someone else. Our family ended when you chose Calvin over us, and this house is going to be mine when the divorce is finalized. Erica stopped crying abruptly. Divorce? At-fault divorce. Adultery, financial misconduct, fraud. You're going to lose everything, Erica. Your job, your reputation, your marriage, your children, your financial security. Everything. You can't take my children away from me. I don't have to take them. They're going to choose. Owen already knows everything. Raina will know soon enough. When they understand what you've done, what you've been doing while they worried about losing their mother, they'll make their own decisions about who they want to live with. Erica's face went white. You told Owen? Owen figured it out himself. Turns out he inherited my eye for detail and your intelligence. Dangerous combination. You turned my son against me. I didn't have to turn him against anything. The truth did that all by itself. That night, Erica packed 2 suitcases and moved into an extended-stay hotel downtown. She left behind 23 years of marriage, 2 children who wouldn't speak to her, and a husband who watched her go with the same expression he wore when he condemned a building as structurally unsound. The divorce proceedings began 3 weeks later. Patricia Williams had been right about the strength of Ruben's case. The evidence of adultery was overwhelming, the financial misconduct was documented, and Erica's legal position was virtually indefensible. But Erica didn't go quietly. She hired Martin Cross, the most expensive divorce attorney in the city, and began fighting back with the same systematic precision Ruben had used to destroy her life. Her counterattack focused on 3 arguments: temporary insanity due to cancer diagnosis, financial duress caused by medical bills, and emotional abandonment by her husband during her illness. My client was facing her own mortality while her husband became increasingly distant and unsupportive, Cross argued during the first hearing. She made poor decisions, yes, but they were the decisions of a woman who believed she was dying and felt utterly alone in her marriage. It was a good strategy. It positioned Erica as a victim of circumstances rather than an architect of betrayal. It suggested that her infidelity was a symptom of deeper marital problems rather than a calculated choice. It might even have worked, if not for Owen. Ruben's son had continued his digital archaeology, uncovering layers of evidence that painted a very different picture of his mother's motivations. The affair hadn't begun after her cancer diagnosis. It had begun months before, during a company retreat where Erica and Calvin had been assigned to work together on a project. The early text messages revealed a woman who was bored with her marriage, attracted to the excitement of a younger man, and actively seeking opportunities for infidelity. The cancer diagnosis hadn't created the affair. It had simply provided cover for escalating it. More damaging still, Owen had discovered evidence that Erica had been planning to leave Ruben even before her diagnosis. Browser history showing apartment searches, consultations with divorce attorneys, even a draft email to Calvin discussing their future together, all dated months before her collapse at the PTA meeting. She wasn't a dying woman seeking comfort, Owen explained to Patricia Williams. She was a woman planning to abandon her family who got sick before she could execute her plan. The evidence was devastating. When Patricia presented it during the second hearing, Erica's narrative of victimhood collapsed completely. "Your Honor," Patricia said, "the defendant's claim of temporary insanity due to medical diagnosis is contradicted by her own digital communications, which show premeditation and planning that predates her illness by several months. This wasn't a woman making desperate choices while facing mortality. This was a woman making calculated choices while planning the systematic destruction of her marriage." Martin Cross tried to salvage his client's position, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Text messages, emails, financial records, location data, everything pointed to the same conclusion. Erica Altman had been planning to leave her husband for months, using her cancer diagnosis as emotional leverage while she positioned herself for an advantageous exit. The court's decision was swift and comprehensive. Ruben was granted primary custody of both children, awarded the house and all marital assets except Erica's personal belongings, and freed from any obligation to pay spousal support. Erica was ordered to pay child support, a cruel irony given that she was now unemployed and essentially unemployable in her field. But the legal victory was only part of Ruben's plan. The more important part was what happened outside the courtroom. News of the affair and the fraud investigation had spread through their social circle with the efficiency of a well-engineered virus. The story had everything: cancer, betrayal, financial fraud, regulatory investigations, and a husband who'd sold his inheritance to pay for his cheating wife's medical bills. Friends who had supported Erica during her illness felt foolish and manipulated. Neighbors who had brought casseroles and offered to help with the children felt betrayed. Professional colleagues who had respected her expertise now questioned everything she'd ever told them. The social destruction was complete. Dinner invitations stopped coming. Former friends crossed the street to avoid conversations. Professional contacts stopped returning phone calls. Calvin Trevor's fared even worse. The regulatory investigations had resulted in criminal charges for fraud and falsification of federal documents. He faced up to 5 years in federal prison and fines that would bankrupt him. More immediately, he faced the wrath of his ex-wife, who had discovered the affair during the investigation and was now pursuing him for modification of their divorce settlement based on hidden assets and fraudulent income reporting. Calvin's life imploded with the thoroughness of a controlled demolition. Career destroyed, freedom threatened, finances devastated, and trapped between two angry ex-wives who both wanted their pound of flesh. By February, he was ready to run. The plan was simple: liquidate what assets he could, transfer the money offshore, and disappear before his criminal trial began. He'd done research on countries without extradition treaties, identified offshore banking options, even secured false identification documents. What he hadn't planned for was Erica's reaction when she discovered he was leaving without her. The confrontation happened on a Thursday evening in the parking lot of Calvin's apartment complex. Erica had been waiting in her car for 2 hours when Calvin returned from what she thought was a job interview, but was actually a meeting with a man who specialized in creating new identities. "Oh, where have you been?" she demanded, getting out of her car as he parked. "Job hunting. Same as every day for the past 3 months." "Bull crap. I called the company. They said your interview was canceled." Calvin studied her face, recognizing the same calculating intelligence that had first attracted him. Erica might be desperate, but she wasn't stupid. "What do you want, Erica?" "I want to know why you're planning to leave me." The accusation hung in the air between them. Calvin could have denied it, could have explained it away, could have bought himself more time to execute his plan. Instead, he told her the truth. "Because you're toxic. Because everything you touch turns to rap. Because I'm not going to prison for a woman who destroyed her own family and then expected me to do the same." Erica's face went white. "I destroyed my family for you. You destroyed your family for you. I was just the excuse you used to justify it." "That's not true. Isn't it? You were already planning to leave Ruben before we even started sleeping together. You were already moving money into secret accounts, already talking to divorce lawyers. I was just convenient timing. I loved you. You loved the idea of me. You loved having someone who thought you were exciting and dangerous instead of just another suburban housewife with a boring husband and ungrateful kids." The words were calculated to wound, and they found their target. Erica stumbled backward as if Calvin had struck her. "Don't you dare," she whispered. "Don't you dare pretend this was all my idea. You pursued me. You seduced me. You made me believe we had a future together." "We did have a future. Right up until you got caught and burned both our careers to the ground." "I got caught? I got caught? You're the one who was falsifying reports. I had nothing to do with that." Calvin laughed, the sound bitter and harsh. "You had everything to do with it. You knew exactly what I was doing. You helped me figure out which supplements to approve, which reports to modify, which inspections to worry about. You were my partner in everything. That's not— I didn't know— Stop lying. You're talking to the wrong audience. I was there, remember? I know exactly what you knew and when you knew it." Erica's composure cracked completely. "So what happens now? You disappear and leave me to face everything alone?" "That's exactly what happens." "I won't let you." Calvin's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice. I know about the fake passport. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about your plans to run." "How could you possibly know about any of that?" Erica smiled for the first time in months. "Because I've been watching you the same way my husband was watching me. The same way my son was watching both of us." "Turns out surveillance runs in the family." Calvin felt ice form in his stomach. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the GPS tracker I put on your car 3 weeks ago. I'm talking about the keylogger I installed on your laptop. I'm talking about the photographs I have of you meeting with very interesting people in very suspicious locations." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Erica pulled out her phone and showed Calvin a photograph of himself shaking hands with a man outside a downtown hotel. The image quality was poor, but the faces were clearly recognizable. "This is you yesterday at 3:17 p.m., meeting with someone who looks suspiciously like the kind of person who helps other people disappear." Calvin stared at the photograph, realizing that his carefully planned escape had been compromised from the beginning. "What do you want?" "I want you to take me with you." "Absolutely not." Then I go to the FBI tomorrow morning with everything I know about your escape plan. They'll freeze your assets, revoke your passport, and put you in jail until your trial. Calvin studied Erica's face, looking for any sign that she was bluffing. He found none. The woman standing in front of him was backed into a corner with nothing left to lose, which made her infinitely more dangerous than he'd realized. Fine, he said finally. But we do this my way, on my timeline, with my rules. Agreed. And when we get where we're going, we're done. No relationship, no partnership, no future together. You go your way, I go mine. Erica nodded, though Calvin could see the calculation in her eyes. She was agreeing to his terms, but she was already planning to renegotiate them once they were safely away. What neither of them knew was that Owen Altman had been tracking both of them for weeks. Reuben's son had inherited his father's methodical nature and his mother's technological skills, but he'd also developed something uniquely his own, an absolute intolerance for people who betrayed his family. Owen had been monitoring Calvin's communications since the affair was first discovered. When Calvin began researching escape routes and false identities, Owen had quietly begun documenting everything. When Erica started her own surveillance operation, Owen had been watching her too. He knew about Calvin's plans to flee the country. He knew about Erica's attempts to blackmail her way into those plans. He knew about the offshore accounts, the false documents, and the meetings scheduled for tomorrow night that would put both of them beyond the reach of American justice. What they didn't know was that Owen had already shared all of this information with his father. Reuben received the text message at 11:47 p.m. while he was reviewing building plans for a commercial inspection scheduled for the next morning. They're running tomorrow night. Flight to Mexico City at 11:15 p.m. Want me to call the police? Reuben stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "No, let them run. Dad, trust me. Let them run." The next evening, Calvin and Erica met at a long-term parking garage near the airport. Calvin had liquidated everything he could convert to cash, nearly $200,000 in various currencies, all packed into a single carry-on bag designed to look unremarkable. Erica brought her own luggage, 2 suitcases containing clothes, jewelry, and personal documents, plus a laptop bag with backup copies of all the evidence she'd gathered about Calvin's escape plan. "Last chance to change your mind," Calvin said as they transferred their bags to a rental car he'd paid for with cash. "I'm not changing my mind." They drove to the airport in silence, both lost in their own thoughts about the life they were leaving behind and the uncertain future ahead of them. The international terminal was busy, but not crowded. Their flight to Mexico City was on time, with connecting flights to several countries that didn't have extradition treaties with the United States. Calvin had chosen their destination carefully, a small coastal city in South America where $200,000 could buy a comfortable life for several years, and where asking too many questions about someone's past was considered rude. They checked in separately, using the false documents Calvin had purchased. The passports were excellent forgeries, good enough to pass casual inspection, but not sophisticated enough to survive serious scrutiny. At 10:45 p.m., they boarded the plane. At 10:52 p.m., FBI agents boarded the same plane. The arrest was swift and professional. Calvin and Erica were handcuffed, read their rights, and escorted off the aircraft before most of the other passengers realized what was happening. The charges were extensive: conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, attempted flight to avoid prosecution, and falsification of federal documents. Calvin faced additional charges related to his quality control violations, while Erica faced charges related to her role in helping him plan his escape. Both would eventually plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations into corruption at Morrison Health Labs. Calvin received 4 years in federal prison. Erica received 2 years plus 5 years of supervised probation, but their arrest was just the opening act of Reuben's final revenge. While Calvin and Erica were being processed into the federal detention center, Reuben was having dinner with his children at their favorite restaurant downtown. "So they're really gone?" Raina asked. She was 15 now, old enough to understand what had happened, but still young enough to be hurt by her mother's choices. "They're gone," Reuben confirmed, "for a long time." "Good," Owen said. "They deserve whatever they get." Raina was quieter, picking at her food. "Do you think Mom ever loved us? Really loved us?" It was the question Reuben had been dreading, because he didn't have a good answer. Had Erica loved her children? Probably. Had she loved them enough to sacrifice her own desires for their well-being? Obviously not. I think your mother loved the idea of being a mother, he said carefully. I think she loved you when it was convenient and easy. But when it came time to choose between what she wanted and what was best for you, she chose what she wanted. That's not love, Raina said. No, it's not. They finished dinner in comfortable silence, then drove home to the house that was now officially and entirely theirs. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, with Erica signing away all parental rights in exchange for a reduced prison sentence. Ruben had offered her one final choice: fight for custody and face the maximum sentence on all charges, or relinquish all claims to the children and accept a plea deal that would have her out of prison in 18 months. She'd chosen herself, just as she'd been doing for the past year. That night, after Owen and Raina had gone to bed, Ruben sat on his back porch with a beer and thought about justice. Erica was in prison. Calvin was in prison. Their careers were destroyed, their reputations ruined, their futures effectively canceled. But somehow, none of it felt like enough. The problem with revenge, Ruben realized, was that it could never actually balance the scales. There was no punishment severe enough to undo the betrayal, no consequence harsh enough to erase the months of lies and deception. Calvin and Erica would serve their time and eventually be released. They would rebuild their lives, find new careers, maybe even find new relationships. The world would forgive them, because the world always forgave people who showed sufficient remorse and served their time. But Owen and Raina would carry the scars of their mother's betrayal for the rest of their lives. They would struggle to trust romantic partners, question the sincerity of everyone who claimed to love them, and wonder if they carried their mother's capacity for selfishness in their own DNA. That was the real crime, Ruben thought. Not the affair itself, but the damage it had done to two innocent children who had worshipped their mother and believed their family was unbreakable. 6 months later, Ruben received a letter from Erica. She was seeking reconciliation, claiming to have found religion in prison, begging for the chance to rebuild her relationship with her children. He read the letter twice, then fed it into his office shredder. 2 weeks after that, Calvin's ex-wife called. The federal investigation had uncovered additional assets that Calvin had hidden during their divorce proceedings. She was wondering if Ruben might be interested in pursuing a civil lawsuit for alienation of affection. There's potentially millions in damages, she explained. Calvin destroyed your marriage just like he destroyed mine. We could both get significant judgments against him. Ruben considered the offer for about 30 seconds, then declined. He didn't want Calvin's money. He wanted Calvin to disappear entirely from his family's life, and pursuing a civil lawsuit would keep him connected to their story for years to come. The final piece of Ruben's revenge came 18 months later, when Calvin was released from federal prison and attempted to contact Erica. Calvin's letter never reached her because Ruben had been monitoring her prison communications with the same thoroughness he'd once applied to building inspections. A carefully placed word with the right corrections officer ensured that certain pieces of mail simply never arrived. Calvin tried calling, but Erica's phone number had been changed. He tried visiting, but she'd been transferred to a different facility. He tried reaching out through mutual acquaintances, but their mutual acquaintances had all moved on with their lives. By the time Calvin realized he was being systematically blocked from any contact with Erica, she'd been released and disappeared into a halfway house in a different state. They would never see each other again. Calvin eventually found work as a night shift security guard at a warehouse outside Detroit. Erica got a job cleaning office buildings in Phoenix. Both lived in studio apartments, drove used cars, and struggled to pay their bills. Both spent their evenings alone, wondering what their lives might have been like if they'd made different choices. Meanwhile, Ruben Altman continued his building inspection business, raised his children, and slowly began dating again. He bought back his father's cabin from the investor who'd purchased it, paying twice what he'd originally sold it for, but not caring about the cost. Owen graduated from high school with a full scholarship to study computer science at MIT. Raina became the editor of her school newspaper and captain of the debate team. Both children had learned important lessons about loyalty, consequences, and the difference between love and selfishness. On a Saturday morning in early spring, 3 years after Erica's arrest, Ruben was having coffee on the porch of the restored cabin when Owen joined him. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked. "The way we handled everything with Mom?" Ruben considered the question. Did he regret destroying his wife's life? Did he regret the methodical, systematic way he dismantled everything she valued? No, he said finally. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. Even though she was sick in her body, not her character. The cancer didn't make her lie to us. The cancer didn't make her steal from us. The cancer didn't make her choose Calvin over her family. Those were choices she made as a healthy, intelligent adult who knew exactly what she was doing. Owen nodded. Raina still misses her sometimes. That's normal. She should miss her. Erica was her mother for 15 years before she became anything else. Do you miss her? Reuben thought about the question. Did he miss the woman who'd lied to him for months while he sold his inheritance to pay her medical bills? Did he miss the woman who'd planned to abandon her family and then used her illness as emotional leverage when her plans went wrong? I miss the woman I thought I married, he said, but that woman never actually existed. She was just a performance Erica put on until she got tired of acting. That afternoon, Reuben drove into town to pick up supplies for a deck he was building behind the cabin. At the hardware store, he ran into Janet Pierce, the realtor who'd handled the sale and repurchase of his father's property. Reuben, how's the cabin renovation going? Good. Should be finished by the end of summer. I'm so glad you were able to buy it back. I always felt terrible about that sale. Don't. You were just doing your job. Janet hesitated, then asked, How are the kids handling everything? I heard about everything that happened with Erica. They're fine. Better than fine, actually. They're learning that actions have consequences and that family means something. That's a hard lesson for children to learn. The hardest lessons usually are. As Reuben loaded lumber into his truck, he reflected on the conversation. Janet was right. It had been a hard lesson for Owen and Raina to learn, but it had also been a necessary one. The world was full of people like Erica and Calvin, people who would take advantage of loyalty, exploit generosity, and betray trust whenever it suited their purposes. Owen and Raina had learned to recognize those people early, before they could cause real damage. That knowledge would serve them well in the years to come. That evening, Reuben grilled burgers while Owen and Raina competed to see who could catch the most fish from the lake. It was a perfect spring evening, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that kept the mosquitoes away. Watching his children laugh and argue and enjoy themselves, Reuben felt something he hadn't experienced in years: complete contentment. This was what he'd fought for. Not revenge exactly, but the preservation of something valuable. His family, what remained of it, was stronger now than it had ever been. Owen and Raina knew they could trust him completely, and he knew they would never betray that trust. Erica had tried to destroy their family, but she'd only succeeded in burning away the parts that were weak and false. What remained was tested, proven, and unbreakable. As the sun set over the lake, Reuben opened a beer and watched his children. Owen was teaching Raina how to tie a more effective fishing knot, while Raina was explaining why his technique was scientifically flawed. They were good kids, smart, loyal, resilient. They would grow up to be the kind of adults who kept their promises, honored their commitments, and protected the people they loved. They would never be like their mother. Reuben's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen and saw a notification from the prison monitoring service he'd subscribed to 3 years earlier. Inmate Erica Dunlow Altman has been released from federal custody. Reuben deleted the message without reading the rest of it. Erica's release date had been scheduled for weeks. Her location, her employment status, her living situation, none of it mattered to him anymore. She was a stranger now, someone who had briefly intersected with his life and then moved on. She had no claim on his thoughts, his emotions, or his future. She was nothing. Owen looked up from his fishing rod. Everything okay, Dad? Everything's perfect. And it was. Reuben had set out to make Erica understand what betrayal cost, and he'd succeeded beyond his wildest expectations. She'd lost her husband, her children, her career, her reputation, her freedom, and her future. But more importantly, she'd lost any power to hurt his family ever again. The lake was peaceful as darkness fell. Somewhere in Phoenix, a woman named Erica Dunlow was starting over with nothing. Somewhere in Detroit, a man named Calvin Trevors was working a night shift and wondering what his life might have been. And here, at a cabin on a lake in Michigan, a man named Reuben Altman was watching his children and thinking about the deck he would build tomorrow. the inspection he had scheduled for Tuesday, and the perfect justice of a world where actions had consequences. He raised his beer in a silent toast to his father, who had taught him the value of methodical planning and attention to detail. Those skills had served him well in his profession, and they had served him even better in his revenge. Erica had underestimated him, just as she had underestimated the damage her betrayal would cause. She'd thought he was weak, predictable, easy to manipulate and abandon. She'd been wrong about everything. As Owen and Raina packed up their fishing gear, Reuben made a mental note to call his attorney on Monday. The civil lawsuit against Morrison Health Labs was finally going to trial, and there was a possibility of significant damages for wrongful termination and defamation. Not that he needed the money. Business was good, the children were thriving, and the cabin renovation was almost complete. But there was something satisfying about the idea of profiting from the same fraud investigation that had destroyed Calvin and Erica's careers. Justice wasn't just about punishment. Sometimes it was about making sure the innocent people prospered while the guilty people struggled. "Ready to head in?" Raina asked, swatting at a mosquito. Ready. They walked back to the cabin together, a father and his two children, united by shared experience and unshakable loyalty. Behind them, the lake reflected the last light of day, calm and undisturbed. Inside the cabin, Owen set up his laptop to work on a programming project while Raina spread her homework across the kitchen table. Reuben poured himself another beer and settled into his father's old recliner with a book about foundation engineering. It was a quiet Saturday night in a life that had finally found its equilibrium. No drama, no lies, no betrayals. Just the simple pleasure of a family that knew it could trust itself. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called across the water. The sound was haunting and beautiful, a reminder that some things in this world remained wild and free and untouchable. Reuben smiled and turned the page of his book. Tomorrow he would continue building the deck. Next week he would start on the dock. Over the summer, he would teach Owen and Raina how to maintain the cabin so they could pass it on to their own children someday. The Altman family legacy would continue, stronger than ever. And Erica Dunlow, wherever she was tonight, would remain exactly what she had chosen to become, a stranger with no claim on their future.